VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. This is the April 22nd episode. We are 3 days away from the NFL draft, which we expect to net the Vikings a quarterback via trade up the board, or if they have this sweet-ass scenario that was outlined by Amir, the Vikings fan, Saturday night, maybe somebody tumbles all the way to 11. Nevertheless, it is an exciting time. We have Vikings territory, a guy who's been with the Vikings territory longer than me, if that can be believed, Sean Borman. He's going to be on for the next probably 20, 30, 35 minutes. We're not sure. And we're going to chat about all this Viking stuff from head to toe, some off-season stuff that he has liked or disliked, his draft takes. Sam Darnold. Let's start off with the Sam Darnold stuff. Josh, I know you want to ask Sean about Sam Darnold, so let's get started with that. It feels like an appropriate spot.
Yeah, so obviously, shortly after the signing, KOC went on record and was like, I think the best football is in front of Sam. He showed a lot of trust in him. And as he should, because right now he's the QB1 of that team. But do you think any chance that the Vikings just don't take a quarterback in this draft and they just decide, yeah, you know what, we've got enough offensive weapons around Sam Darnold. We trust this guy enough from what we've seen over the past few years. Is there any chance that they just decide to roll into the regular season and with Sam Darnold as QB1?
So I'm glad you guys asked me this just because I was able to dig into Darnold a little bit more. I honestly didn't know, I guess, much about him and just much even back into college. So I started with his college highlights from USC. Excuse me. And I've never seen a highlight reel that like caused anxiety before. But that's kind of how I felt at first. He had super happy feet, so just you can imagine what that looks like. And a lot of his throws were very. He got lucky, basically. They were into traffic. They were tipped up. His receivers came down with it and went from there. So I was a little nervous. I was very nervous when I first saw that. But I did more digging. I started there and moved forward with his NFL career. Uh, and I should probably answer your question. I'll address the answer to your question at the end of this because I kind of want to let
Keep
you
on
guys know
going.
what I experienced. Yeah, he looking more into it. He was drafted by the Jets, obviously, third overall, 2018, into a really poor situation. It was probably the worst team in the NFL at that time. So he didn't get a lot of help there. I think that's important to provide that context when you look at his stats. And he struggled there. There were some things to like. I did a little tape watching from his time with the Jets and with the Panthers. The thing that stuck out to me most when watching his film, which surprised me, was his footwork. Uh, it was it caught me off guard. It was very good. He was almost nimble at times when escaping pressure. Uh, he was shifty. He just moved well. It's not something that I expected to see, but it does make sense when you're talking about the third overall pick in the draft. So that's my first takeaway there. And reading up on his draft profile, he's known for having a strong arm, which I didn't find him to have a strong arm, but he has a lot of arm talent, meaning that he can use um, different angles with his throws,
Right.
different. You can kind of see what I'm getting at there, but he I don't know, like just watching his tape, there's a lot to be desired, especially from his time with the Jets and the Panthers. The coaching situations weren't great. Um, and when he was given an opportunity with the 49ers to potentially become their starter this past year, I think that was a good thing for his development. And we even heard a quote from KOC recently regarding the happy feet that I saw in his tape. Early on, those were his traits. He just had happy feet. He wasn't very good. But KOC said recently, Darnold got efficient with his lower half during his time with Chicago, which was much needed. And I'm sorry, with San Francisco. So I think that was much needed. I really am optimistic about that aspect of his game. Because one thing that really stood out to me on his draft profile was that he doesn't need perfect protection to be successful. And when you're talking about the Vikings, the interior offensive line is still an issue. That's still a pretty major issue in my opinion. So he has the ability to kind of overcome that and still be accurate, which I think it will be beneficial in KOC's offense. In terms of his fit with the Vikings, I like that he has a lot of yards after catch potential. He's a very good rhythm thrower, and just in terms of timing, hitting guys in stride. Uh, that will be one of his strengths in the Vikings offense. So I'm optimistic that he'll be able to hit Justin Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, and pick up a lot of yards after catch. So I think that'll be important. That's pretty exciting too when you consider guys like Aaron Jones coming out of the backfield. So between his footwork and just being able to maneuver the pocket, being able to handle pressure pretty well, I do think that O'Connell is not crazy for thinking that his best days could be in front of him. But I think we should really temper our expectations because he just simply hasn't done it yet in the NFL. So I would wait and see how he does, and it's hope for the best, right? I'm really excited to see what he can do in training camp, but I think we should temper our expectations and not expect the world from him. And to answer your question, no, we should absolutely be looking at a quarterback in the draft. I think it'd be a disaster if we did not find a quarterback in this draft. It mainly because O'Connell and Kwesi's jobs could be in jeopardy if they don't. It would just look pretty bad from a PR standpoint.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And I think the one thing that honestly, in terms of just his time in Carolina, like the fact that he went 4-2 there as a starter, he had DJ Moore, but he didn't have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison to throw to. And their defense was decent, but I think Minnesota's defense this year especially has a chance to be better than that Carolina defense from a couple of years ago. So yeah, I think this is honestly a really good situation for him just to, even if it's just a bridge year, like I think the Vikings can at least be competitive with him, but I'm definitely with you. And like, there's so many quarterbacks in this draft. You have to take a shot at least one, even if you don't land one of the top 4 guys that everybody's talking about,
Yeah, I keep asking on the sentiment, like the fringe sentiment, like what if they just don't end up with one of the big 4 or big 6? When you get into your like fears on that, it's like I always come down to this: if not now, when? You just said goodbye to your quarterback. Your job security, like Sean said, is really going to heat up if you either do nothing or you're like, hey, Michael Pratt in round 4, baby. Like, they just don't have the leverage. If they drafted somebody last year and it was like Hendon Hooker or somebody was sitting behind them, they could feel good about that job security. But the way that they lined this up with Kirk walking this offseason, and they're into year 3 now, I just don't think that they have the luxury to wait. So whenever I'm like, could that really happen? I'm like, if they're not going to draft a quarterback now, then when would they do it? They're going to wait until next year? I don't think so. And also on Darnold, it's worth noting that this will be his last best chance to establish himself as a starting quarterback, or his last chance in general. And for him, he'll probably have Drake May or JJ McCarthy chilling behind him. So it really won't matter for the Vikings what he does. But in terms of doing his Baker Mayfield best impression, he's got to make this right. He's going to be 27 in June. It's was a third overall pick in 2018. So it's all on the line for him, backs against the wall, and hopefully that increases the Vikings' wherewithal to win some games. Brevin, what else do we got for Sean Borman, VikingsTerritory.com?
Yeah, well, he kind of hinted at it with what he thinks we should do with looking at the quarterback, because can't exactly roll with Darnold all the way. And domino effect, I mentioned that too. Like that's directly affecting your Justin Jefferson extension and having to sell him on kind of having to commit to this bridge quarterback while he's negotiating the biggest non-quarterback contract in NFL history. So all good points there. And Sean, we're going to ask for your prediction here in a little bit, I have a feeling. But if you were the general manager sitting in Kwesi's office, what would your recommendation? What would the moves you make? What would be the moves that you make for the draft?
So When I started looking at the quarterbacks in the draft, I looked at them almost solely through the lens of who would be the best fit for the Vikings, because that's just, I guess, how my mind works. And maybe you guys are the same too. But
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, it's just like, all right, who's going to fit best, and who can I see, in purple in the future? So with that in mind, I went through the prospects, and the person who stuck out to me quite obviously was Drake May, for quite a few reasons. Just his downfield zip and his downfield accuracy when it's on is just something that I can't say that I've seen before in a prospect. It's Roethlisberger-esque to me. The way he can just be so pinpoint 25 yards down the field. And then you add in his size and the fact that he's pretty young still and getting better. It's pretty exciting. So I think his fit throwing downfield to JJ, over the top to Addison, having that threat, I think would be huge. I do have concerns still with May. That's not to say he's a perfect prospect. For example, I feel like the offensive line, again, the interior offensive line needs improvement. He could be kind of a sitting duck the way Cousins was for years. So I feel like that is definitely an area they should use all this cap space on, is fortifying the interior, well, fortifying both sides, honestly, the trenches, offensive and defensive line, interior. So there, like, he's not a super mobile guy. I feel like they need to fortify that at least a little bit. And he did have an ankle injury, from what I read in 2023. So that could explain kind of his dip in completion percentage. Not to say that's a negative on his game, but it's something that stood out to me, and I think it explains why we saw that little dip in production when you look at his college stats. But I did go back and look at some of his 22 tape, and
That's the good
holy crap! Yeah, have you guys watched it? It's
Yeah.
when he's on, man, this guy could be. His ceiling is sky high. So between his fit, his ceiling, it just feels like, and obviously the Vikings connections, Josh McCown, even Darnold, having that connection. I think they're posturing to make that move, and it just feels like he'd be the best fit, hands down, between all the prospects.
Would you be completely against like a trade up for McCarthy?
No. In fact, I think that could be ultimately what plays out. And McCarthy is a good prospect too. With both guys, I have positives and negatives. Some of the positives I have for McCarthy is, for one, he's more gettable, I guess. In terms of draft capital, you're not going to have to give up as much, most likely, if you're going to trade up for McCarthy rather than May. He's obviously got the national championship experience under his belt. He's a good leader from all accounts. So yeah, there's a lot to like there. I do have concerns with him throwing left, which we've seen in the past with your Mitchell Trubisky's, who it seems still can't throw left.
Yeah.
So I'm just concerned about that because, in fact, I reached out to Thor and just get to gather his thoughts on him, McCarthy throwing left, and he seems to find it as a fixable thing, which I don't necessarily agree with, just because I said Trubisky had that issue and it's still not fixed. So he thinks it's a pretty simple issue. We'll see about that. The one thing I did notice when watching tape on McCarthy was his tendency to throw a lot of fastballs, not a whole lot of touch. But during the games, the more I watched, the more I did see touch on his throws, and he did pepper those in when he needed to. So I like both prospects. I prefer May, but I do think McCarthy is definitely a more gettable option, and he would ultimately be my prediction on who the Vikings take.
Well, you buried the lead. You spoiled it, I should say.
Yeah, I spoiled it.
No, that's all good. So that's usually the Vikings aren't in the market for a quarterback, but because we covered the NFL. You scout the class nevertheless. And that over the last 5 years, that's the first thing I look for on the tape is whether or not the guy can throw outside the numbers, because we can see the undoing of men who can't, who otherwise are dazzling, like Bridgewater. He never really efficiently threw outside the numbers when he got to Denver. Like his wide receivers numbers just went to hell. It's why Dobbs mania ran out so quickly, because we saw all the good in the first 2 games. And then when it came time to, do the normal quarterback thing, like using the sidelines, it was like, oh, this is why nobody wants him. And so that is the single most reason why I gravitated towards May over McCarthy, was that it doesn't seem that May has any problem whatsoever throwing outside the numbers, whereas just finding the sheer highlights where McCarthy does that successfully or efficiently, there aren't many. And so the only thing you can tell yourself if you're a McCarthy guy is, well, they don't really need him to do that much in Michigan. So that's what I've been doing, with the assumption that McCarthy could very visibly become the pick for the Vikings. And then on your first sentence on this topic about looking at it through a Vikings lens when you're scouting that is absolutely a thing, because I'll give you an example. With Michael Penix, I am certain if the Rams surprise some folks and draft him, he's going to be great. The moment Stafford walks away, Penix in that system with McVay, he's going to be fine. But with the Vikings, it's not going to be a problem of O'Connell. It's that damn injury history is going to just flare up. As soon as he gets in purple, it's going to be like, oh yeah, well, there's one tendon down, and I have this cynical paranoia that it's not going to happen with some other team. So that's that. I do precisely that. So I believe Penix can succeed in a good system, but with the Vikings, I just know something rotten's going to happen, and we will have known about it because the injury resume is humongous. All right, so he's recommending Drake May, which is, I think Josh's ultimate guy is Jaden Daniels. Brevin and I firmly Drake May and have been for months. So is Tyler Ireland, the producer of the show. Josh, what else do we got for Sean? We got some time.
Yeah, so you mentioned early on the cap space. Obviously they got a boatload of it next year, but they got a pretty nice chunk of it still this offseason. Looking at just some of the free agents that are left on the board, who is one guy that stands out as the Vikings should go get him?
Yeah, so I checked out the free agents, and to be honest, it's slim pickings. There's not many guys. If I could say nobody, I would. There's nobody I really want to bring in, but I do think it might be wise to bring in somebody like Xavier Howard, a cornerback from Miami, just because the Vikings still need help there. They need help at cornerback. They brought in Shaq Griffin, I realize, but Xavier Howard's better. He may cost a little bit more, but like you said, they have the cap space and they need help at cornerback. We saw some issues down the stretch. Byron Murphy had a pretty solid season. I still think he's playing out of position. I like him better in the slot. But Caleb Evans really struggled at times last year.
It was an up and down year. Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the idea in bringing in the Shaq Griffin, is to kind of be that guy over on that right side, or at least provide competition. So Xavier Howard, I feel like he's been shut down at times in his career, and I know he's getting up there in age. He'll be 31, but he does have the Brian Flores connection, and I feel like that would just be a smart utilization of the assets that they still have.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned he might cost a little bit more, but like we're kind of getting to the point of the offseason where none of these guys are going to cost as much as what they originally would have, if we were just getting into it in March or something. But we're kind of getting to that point where teams already kind of have their roster set, and these guys just looking around like, okay, where am I going to play next year? I guess I'll go take this deal because I can't really get anything else at this point. So I do agree he'll probably cost a little bit more, but I think it's pretty realistic. At least they've got like 16 million in cap space right now, something like that. So I don't think maybe 8 million is the most that you give Xavier Howard, but at this point, is he going to get anything better? I don't know.
And that is the 16 million without even doing anything with Brian O'Neill, like with a restructure. Right. They always have that in their bag if they have to do something. The cool thing about these cornerbacks, the CBs that could be gettable after the draft, is Brian Flores has connections to both of them. Stephon Gilmore with New England for 2 or 3 seasons. And then, of course, Xavier Howard in Miami. The other one that I have on my radar, and it's probably a pipe dream, if the Vikings get through this draft and get into the summer and they believe, like, you know what, we believe we're going to get to the postseason, which is a pretty Viking way of thinking. I think Calais Campbell could fit at defensive tackle, and that's mainly because he's the only guy left that would, be an upgrade. And they struck out on about 6-7 defensive tackles that everybody knew if you're more than a casual football fan. And Calais Campbell just never shows up to a season and performs poorly. Now, if the Vikings concede, like, oh, we know Sam Darnold, we ain't doing shit, or hey, we're starting Drake May, I mean, we know we're going to take our lumps, then I don't know if Calais would bite on going to a team that's going to go 6-11. But if they do the Viking thing, which is, you know what, we're going to go 10-7, get in the playoff, baby. Calais Campbell is about the only defensive tackle left. And the only reason I bring him up is sometime there's going to be some human being that works in Egan that realizes that you could go out there and sign a guy who's good at this spot. You don't have to just do a bunch of assholes every single year. And so one person's going to wake up one day and be like, what? We can go sign a 3-tech? Whoa. And then, if that's going to be this summer, Calais Campbell is about, down to the nubbins of availability. And he's not nubbins. A guy, man, his resume is so lengthy. And you would think, like, hey, you're going to pull him up and see his PFF is like 57.2. No, that thing never goes below like 70. The guy is just a stud. So if they convince themselves that they can be, nibblers, contention for the NFC North, I think they should sign somebody at defensive tackle, and Calais is that's all left.
He was actually second on my list.
Yeah.
Calais was. He's a mountain of a man, just a giant guy. He's got positional versatility. If you want to put him at D end or a nose tag, what have you. So I would love that, honestly.
Yeah, I would too.
They need the depth there.
Yeah, they need the depth.
Kyrie's Tonga is still
free agent. He's with the Cardinals.
Oh, did he sign with the Cardinals?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he left about 3 weeks ago. And there'll be folks watching this, assuredly, if they know Calais Campbell's body of work, they'll be like, well, why the hell would he want to sign with the Vikings? I get that. But he also just played for the Falcons for 3 years. And that was the Ritter show and Heineke show. So it's not like he is a quintessential ring chaser, which he probably should be. And maybe he'll get with the program and go to the Chiefs or something. But if he wants to do what he's done the past couple of years and, hey, we're going to go 7-10, come do it here. Like, I know that Kwesi and Kevin are convinced themselves that they can, get in a wild card spot. That's just the way that the Vikings have always been. It's the competitive and a competitive rebuild. All right, Brevin, let's do a couple more with Sean Borman. What do you got one? You got another one?
Yeah, actually, kind of going off the cuff here. I don't know if you've seen the news about the tampering investigations. I haven't really thought anything was going to happen just because I feel like if you have to punish one, you got to punish literally everybody in the NFL. But I guess Atlanta's would seem to be a little bit extra, I guess, and Kirk Cousins kind of just confirming in his intro presser that, yeah, I talked to the trainer. What about it? What
I hope you capture that for the YouTube short, please.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's views. What do you think is like a realistic punishment for the Falcons for doing this? Because I can't remember the exact, but there's been a couple cases where teams have been docked a significant amount of draft capital. So do you see Atlanta getting severely punished, slapped on the wrist? What do you think?
That's a good question. I have seen some previous examples of this too, and it's usually kind of a slap on the wrist. It's whether it's an exchange of like 3rd round picks, what have you, something along those lines. I really don't know about this one. There's all the talk about swapping picks, the 1st round picks with the Vikings. I just don't know.
That's the
Florio. Is that what Florio brought up? I don't know how realistic that is.
I dream at night too.
Right. So I guess it's kind of wait and see. I wish I had a little bit more knowledge in this area, but I really don't. So I don't really know what to expect here. It would be nice to get that 1st round swap, but it would also be a little chaotic this late in the process to be changing your pick entirely. It'd be nice. I think the Vikings could get more value if that were to happen, but I don't quite see them moving up to 8. I'd be surprised if that does happen. I'll put it that way.
That'd be really awesome. And again, like it's hard for any of us to say, I guess. Just like I mean, I think Atlanta might get docked like a mid-round or late-round pick or something. And I don't see the NFL taking 8th overall from them. I mean, that would be funny, I guess. But I also thought it was funny because there was a Falcons fan I saw like right before we started the show. Actually, they quote tweeted the report of the report that the NFL is going to finish the investigations early this week, and they quote tweeted it and said, "I can't. Kirk Cousins is already throwing picks, and the season hasn't even started yet." I thought that was funny.
And now we can laugh at those types of mentions. Usually we pull out the sledgehammers and defend. The thing about the Falcons that I want our viewers to know, and tampering in general, is it usually doesn't involve the team that was affected or screwed. They don't usually say, "Hey, baby, we're going to give you this diamond ring." It's usually we're going to just assess a penalty against the perpetrator. So whether it was, I think Adam Schefter talked about this today on an article, whether it was Brady and Sean Payton, the tampering with the Dolphins, they didn't give anything to the Patriots or the Saints. They were just like, shame on you. We're taking away your first round pick. So this idea advanced from Pro Football Talk that there could be a first round pick swap, that would be unprecedented. And the only reason it would make sense is if the Roger Goodell said, you know what, we're making them the example. And I just have never seen that they really care about tampering that much. So remember that usually tampering penalties are against the team that did the tampering, that don't necessarily benefit the team that was screwed, which arguably, like, nobody really cares that Cousins went to the Falcons.
I think you've mentioned it. I think you've mentioned it before. Like, why do they call it the legal tampering period?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
12 p.m. Eastern or whatever strikes on March 11th, and now you can tamper. But before that, don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Now it's legal.
Yeah, I haven't understand the dichotomy of saying, like, calling it legal tampering and then saying, whoa, they tampered.
Yeah, and then you still like can't even really do all that much tampering, because that's what Kirk Cousins got in trouble for, was talking to people in the organization during the legal tampering period. It's like, what are we doing here? If it's legal tampering, just let it happen.
Yeah, the only reason that this is a thing, like, in terms of the speculation, is because of ProFootballTalk.com. I don't know if he got some inside sourcing. All right, speaking of wild theories, I got one more for you, Sean, because we're gonna force you to expand on your prediction since you spoiled it in the middle of the show. Here's the deal. So this is a couple birdies chirped to me over the weekend that said Justin Jefferson's deal is complete, or if it's not complete, is like super intimate, that everybody knows it's going to be locked in. And so that, that I happened to confirm that during the Timberwolves game when he was there in his sweet outfit. But here's my question to you afterward. I think it was yesterday on Instagram. Jefferson had on his sweet fancy jacket, and then he had a song lyric that said something about money, and that was from a Drake song. And then I learned about an hour ago on Twitter that song is called 8 a.m. in Charlotte, which is where Drake May from North Carolina. So I want to know, you have just Jefferson addressing the money angle on Instagram. He used a Drake quote, Drake May is in this draft. And then the song is called 8 a.m. in Charlotte, which intensifies the North Carolina connection.
I love it. I love this.
Is this the tinfoil like Thor talked about, tinfoil hat? Or is Jefferson really doing like his Taylor Swift lyric deeper meaning?
Oh, man. That's I can be as big as conspiracy theorist too as there is. So I would love to do some more digging after the show. But that I like that, because I mean I'm honestly hoping that it's May that is our guy.
Yeah.
And the more I've looked into this for such a long time, I honestly wanted to bring up Jaden Daniels as a possibility, but I just don't see Washington moving out of 2. And just New England at 3 is just such a likely, the most likely trade candidate of the 3. So yeah, I wish I knew what he meant by that, but those are some very interesting facts that were laid out there, and awesome to hear that his deal is basically done too. I obviously can't wait to see the details on that, especially the length of the contract. I could foresee it being a little more expensive than folks maybe would guess in terms of average per year. I've always thought it'd be about 35, but we'll see. We'll see.
I had it when the offseason started. My prediction was 4 years, 132 million, which is kind of in the middle of being the highest paid wide receiver. I won't be surprised one iota if you're correct and it's closer to 35 million. But yeah, usually this show should know pretty well I don't dabble in those things, but all of those connections, the money, the song artist's first name, and then the song called Charlotte, 8 a.m. in Charlotte. We were going to advance that one a la PFT. All right, Josh, I want you to nail down this guy on his draft prediction.
Yeah, so you mentioned J.J. McCarthy, probably the guy that the Vikings are going to target, at least in your mind. Who do you think that makes the most sense as a trade partner to move up and go get McCarthy?
That's also another good question because I know Arizona's been talked about quite a bit about being a potential trade candidate or trade down candidate. But they also have Harrison Jr. sitting right there if they want him.
Right.
And to me, that seems like a pretty obvious pick if they do stay put. So I'm looking at the Chargers at number 5. And that's, if we get Williams, Daniels, May, top 3, then Harrison, and then trading up to 5 to go get McCarthy. Seems the most logical to me. I do potentially kind of worry about the Giants making a move up as well. It'd be interesting to see what happens there. But I do feel with the 2 first-round picks, and then I think the Vikings would be willing to go beyond that too, and I'll offer. I don't want to see them offer next year's first-round pick, but they may have to, and I think that would trump any offer that the Giants would give them. I just think it's nice. It would be nice for the Chargers to just drop back a spot and pick up, Neighbors or whoever they want to get with that next pick. But so yeah, that's why I'd love to see the Vikings make the trade all the way up to 3 with New England to pick up May. I just think at this point, I just feel like it's more likely that McCarthy at 5 could be how it plays out.
Yeah, the Jim Harbaugh connection, and then it's obviously not going to be as expensive. For me, my dream scenario is just the Cardinals take Marvin Harrison at 4. Chargers take either Malik Neighbors or an offensive tackle. Giants, and hopefully the Giants, everything is actually a smokescreen like everybody's talking about, and they go get a wide receiver, whatever they want. And then Tennessee Titans are sitting there at 7, and Quasy's got a pretty damn good relationship with their GM. It's Ron Carthon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And maybe then you don't even have to give up 23 to get up that high, and then Tennessee can move down to 11, take whatever offensive tackles available, because there still will be some pretty damn good offensive tackles available. But that's a dream scenario in my mind, but we'll see what happens. I don't know if I necessarily buy it.
That's interesting.
Go ahead, Sean.
Not to interrupt, but yeah, I'm curious, like, why do the Giants need a quarterback so badly this year? That's my question. Like, it's confusing to me. It's like you got one of the best receivers in the draft, one of the top 2, like sitting right there. You could get Bowers if you really wanted to. Like, the whole quarterback thing with New York is confusing to me.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
go ahead.
They signed a 4-year deal, and obviously they got an out after this year, but you signed him to that 4-year deal for a reason. Like, you had at least some faith in him when you made that move. You don't just make a move for 160 million to just be like, maybe we'll give this guy a shot. Maybe 2 years we'll just get rid of him. I still don't buy that either.
Yeah, I think it is a smokescreen and a path to get Neighbors. But the only reason that it could be true was they quickly realized, like, oh man, he didn't progress in the first half of last year like we thought. We, being somewhat wise businessmen, are going to hedge our own bet. And the break off point at this time next year or slightly before is pretty clean. It's not one of those ones like Russell Wilson or the wild Justin Herbert theories. They're not going to have to swallow oodles of dead cap, which is usually the case when you even spitball getting rid of your franchise quarterback. But no, I don't think the Giants take a quarterback. I don't even think that they're going to be one of those teams that the Vikings have to box out. The other thing on the Patriots being the trade partner that I think in my estimation, thinks it's more likely that the Vikings can do it is The other teams, if you exclude the Giants, that may want to get up to 3 would be the Broncos, and then I guess in theory the Raiders. And those are teams that the Patriots, even though they're not division rivals, they shouldn't have any desire to do business. It'd be like Kwesi right now having the 3rd pick, and we're talking about, oh, should we trade with the Saints or the Eagles? We wouldn't want to enable them whatsoever. And the last time I checked, the Patriots have pretty documented history with the Broncos and the Raiders. So I think the Vikings have an incumbent advantage to, if they're going to trade with anybody, the Patriots, that is, then it'll probably be an NFC team that just so happens to have more ammunition in this draft to move up the board. That's why I keep coming back to the Vikings doing business with the Patriots. And I know it won't be affordable, but this is the way it goes.
I'm interested to get your guys' thoughts on what you think this offer would be to get up to 3. Because one of my friends he's a Patriots fan that I trust. He also does a lot of cap stuff. Is saying it's going to be a Godfather offer of at least 4 first-round picks, as well as the sweetener. So I don't know if that's feasible or not. I trust this guy's opinion, so it may take that much, but that seems a little on the spendy side to me.
I think it would take just about that much personally, but the beauty and why I'd be kind of okay with doing that, if you're sending 4 first-round picks, you're not just getting 3 back. You're going to be getting at least a mid-rounder back from New England. Like if you can get a second-round back this year, not saying that's as valuable as your first-round pick potentially in 2026, but if everything is going according to what we think is O'Connell and Kwesi's plan, in 2026, Minnesota might be good, and that first-round pick is not 12, 11 overall. It's 25, 26 overall. So if you look back, and I've referenced it a couple times, if you look at the Miami and San Fran trade from a couple of years ago, where San Fran unfortunately traded everything to go get Trey Lance and then got bailed the hell out by drafting a top 12, 15 quarterback with the last pick in the draft, which that must be so cool. They got a first round pick back in that trade. So I think it was one of the later years they got a first round pick back. So Minnesota, if they're trading 4 first, it wouldn't just be 4-3 straight up. You're getting at least a valuable pick back in it too, and that's where I'd be kind of okay with that.
Especially if it's a 3rd rounder this year, you could go in and draft like a center, maybe get Bradbury's replacement or something like that. I've heard centers are pretty deep along with wide receivers, so yeah, that's a good point.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and even go get defensive tackle, like that's the big need, and there's going to be, I don't necessarily think there would be like stars in the 3rd round at defensive tackle, but at least you can get somebody who can be maybe not a starter day 1, but eventually, and you've got at least a bit of a plan rather than just running it back with Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Bullard every single year and just hoping for the best with those 2 guys. But yeah, I think Brett makes a really good point there, where like it's going to seem like a lot giving up 4 first-round picks, but at the end of the day, if you're getting something back, and New England's got a lot of really good draft capital in this year's draft that could help the Vikings out a lot. So I think that's something to at least consider when making this trade.
If it's going to be 4 first-round picks from the Vikings, there's going to be a lot of shit coming back because I don't think it's not going to be unadulterated. Here's the 4 picks, and then we'll take number 3 and talk to you later. That's criminal. So I don't know what it is. Like we've just been boiled in like lukewarm water that's turned boiling. Where we've come to this realization that 3 first-round picks isn't that much. Well, I'm here to report that it is. Like it is an obscene amount on any trade calculator. So one of my bold draft predictions that I'm going to type out today is that the trade won't end up being as expensive as we've been led to believe, all this bullshit about 4 first-rounders plus Darisaw while you're at it. No, it's not going to be quite like that. If it's going, I think it'll end up being 3 first-rounders at its base. And then if they have to throw in Lewis Cine or something like that, it's going to be the 3 first-rounders and then a little bit after that. If we start getting into the realm of 4 first, then I'm under the assumption, all right, well, we're getting the Patriots 2nd, and the next year we're getting their 3rd, and it's going to be more of a meet in the middle. And I think it's only because we've been spitballing this for over 6 weeks that we've decided that 3 first-rounders isn't enough. That is a lot. Try any draft trade calculator that there is on the internet, like one of the ones that's attached to a simulator, or just one of the ones for fun, and you have to force the son of a bitch for it to work. And so I know that the Patriots are in a unique position where they can gouge a little bit, but I don't think that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is going to allow himself just to be bitch slapped all around. Like, it's just, that's not how he does things.
And speaking on that too, like the rumor, or I don't even want to say rumor. It feels insulting to the term rumor to even say, like, the Patriots fans that are like, oh, we're going to need 3 first-round picks and Justin. Like, first of all, lay down the crack pipe. Second of all, in the grand scheme, I understand quarterback tax. Trust me, I do. You're moving down 8 spots and getting another first-round pick. And you're going to get you'll be the first or second team to pick a defensive player on the defensive side of the ball. That was completely not contradictory, but you know, so you're gonna have your pick of the litter on defense at 11 and then plus 23. The Patriots need a lot more than a quarterback, if we're being honest with ourselves. And I think those picks going forward, I think they're going to be bad for 2 years. Hot take, at least. And looking at Gerard Mayo, and then you have like a fake general manager, whatever. Like, he is the general manager, but he's not. That team is so weird. Guess what Gerard Mayo specializes in? Defense. So I don't know. I just, the theories of, we'll take Christian Darrisaw and like your entire future. Like, no, you won't. You'll take 3 or 4 first. And
it's always something new too. And it started with Jefferson on top of everything. It's like, oh, that's a nice little deal sweetener there, fellas. Then it was Darrisaw last week. That was even mentioned in some, I think it was ESPN article. And it's limitless. The reason that I think that the trade ultimately won't be like, crazy over 3 first-rounders is the Vikings can tell them to go to hell. We're just going to talk to the Cardinals. And then we're going to go talk to the Chargers after that. Oh, no, we talked to Josh Fry. We're going to go talk to the Titans if one of our guys fall. So there's teams that said very vocally that they're all open for business. And I think it created a market for the Vikings to be a little bit more flexible, whereas it's not only the Patriots or you're screwed and you're get Bo Nix. I don't think that is the stakes here. I think there is a little bit of room for Kwesi to at least fake and say, that's fine. We have Sam Darnold. We are more than happy with Michael Penix. You can go to hell if you start asking for all that shit that Patriot fans are asking for.
Maybe not.
All right, Sean, we appreciate you joining. We kept you a lot longer than we expected. Will you come back on after the draft sometime soon and go through all these picks with us?
Yeah, of course. I wanted to talk about how much I disliked the Shaq Griffin pickup too, but we can do that later.
Yeah, we don't. We're gonna keep this draft week vibe pretty positive.
Okay.
So yeah, you'll hit us with that next week. All right, gentlemen, we'll talk to you guys really soon. We got Matt Fries on tonight and a bunch of other guests later this week. You guys take it easy.
See you, fellas.
Later.
Yeah.